How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another installment of Tech Support Thursday. We are on ticket number 12. It's kind of every week is a big deal. So again, I want to thank everybody that has been a recent subscriber and has been watching the videos. I definitely do appreciate that. Started the new job this past week. Really cool stuff, good stuff there. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to go through and answer a bunch of questions that have come through the comment section of the channel and do my best to try to answer them. I released a couple of videos and I got a lot of feedback on some of them. So there will be some things that I will do my best to try to answer. There's going to be a lot of questions that they're there that I'm not going to answer because they're based off of the video that I released. The response was interesting, to say the least. So I'm going to start off not quite a week ago, but because there's a lot to cover, and like I said, I'm going to do my best to hit them all. So the first one was SD-WAN 3, SD-WAN VPNs, overview and controller setup. I'm 4 videos down, and I have to say best demo I've seen so far. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. There's a comment on SD-WAN 19, Service VPN 1, NAT Dynamic, Pat, Local Internet Breakout. Hi Rob, you haven't turn off the ICMP blocking below NAT in VPN 0, gig 00, but you still able to ping 1.2.3.4 from iOS 13 router. You have turned that option off in next video. I'd have to go back and look because it's been seriously almost a year since I recorded these videos. I don't remember specifically what was clicked and what wasn't clicked. So I'll have to go back and review that video and see what it is that you're referencing. So that might be true, but because if you turned ICMP off, you're right, it should block it. Not sure why it wouldn't, but Data Center 9000V VXLAN 1 series intro and what we'll cover. There is no join button for our country. Whoever please can share topology and config files via email. You can send me, how do I want to do that? I'll respond with my email, and if you don't have the ability of joining, I will work with you on that. I just noticed this one. And I can potentially just send you the files through email. Next is 9000V VXLAN 10 inter VNI routing and symmetric IRB. Hi Rob, is there any reason that sometimes the ping is not working? However, we can see the L2 EVPN details in our BGP table. Can you please explain aging timers in EVPN? It's one of those things where, because it's a virtual lab, sometimes I chalk things up to just being virtual issues. There are times when the pings just don't work. It could be a convergence thing. I don't really have a specific reason or know why specifically the pings fail. Sometimes things just happen. I don't want it to be, I don't know, and it just happens is my response, because that's kind of not a technical response. But I would have to look up the aging timers to dive into that, as I don't know what they are off the top of my head. But regular MAC address aging timers, they are 5 minutes on a regular switch. I don't know if that applies to Nexus as well. I know it does in Catalyst, but that's basically what I'm aware of. So I'll look that up and respond to the question more directly on that way. So I released a video on Monday, Memorial Day. I said the video was how $1,000 investment can help you earn $100,000 or more a year. And I actually got some interesting feedback. I mean, the video was geared towards the IT folks. It's like, here, you invest $1,000 in a server, some software, and some licensing, and you will basically open the gateway to a six-figure salary or better. I got a lot of interesting feedback. Some of it was technical for some people that watched the video on the channel that know I'm a technical channel. And I got some feedback from people when it came to investments and things like that. You know what? I'm glad I got more reach than I was expecting, because that's the beauty of YouTube, right? So I'm just going to let it roll. And if people get exposure, I learned some things that I didn't know. So if people get exposure to some stuff and, they can take advantage of it, more power to you. So one of the first questions was, what about bare metal Eve or CML installation? Are there any benefits? I personally I've deployed Eve bare metal, and I just didn't get the same. It's not that it was worse than a virtual machine. It was more or less one of those things where I wanted to be able to run multiple instances of Eve inside of ESXi, and ESXi, yeah, it's purpose built for that. So I ran it that way because it was just easy to work with. This is an awesome video. Literally packaged it up perfectly. Didn't just say, hey, download Eve NG. You told us where to get the legit images as well. Quality content right here. Hey, I appreciate that. And that was the goal. Was, hey, you need a server, right? You need a server with a decent amount of resources on it. You need to be able to download Eve to run all your Cisco images in order to do all your Cisco prep. You also need to get access to VMware and the licensing for that, so you can learn VMware. And the cool thing about it is, once you have that downloaded, it's just a matter of getting creative with your lab. I mean, that's all I've done, is I've looked at something, I'm like, okay, what if I do this, or what if I do that? And just try to get creative with the operations. That's all I'm doing. I wouldn't consider myself anyone special in the industry in that respect. It's just, I like to play around with it until things work. So this was a multiple part question. Go ahead and so I have CML installed in Eve NG about a few weeks ago. I had to leave GNS3 because the VIX wrapper issue. I think that has to do with the iOS V images. I believe I remember something about VIX with hardware assisted virtualization or something like that. But anyway, using CML, I discovered I have no access to serial interface to practice BGP. Seems like you can only get that with iOS Linux. Is this true? I honestly have no idea. Number one, I've never used CML. I only have paid for the access to the images, and I have downloaded them, modified them appropriately to work with inside of EveNG, and then just used the EveNG. I've never used CML. I used to use Viral, and I don't recall having any issues with Viral. Also, I have a Dell T14 server. T410, sorry, with only a max RAM of 64 gigs and a quad-core processor. I got that because I was worried about server noise. I feel like I need something that can handle a lot more virtualization, specifically for large topology. How loud is your Cisco server? I honestly have no idea. It sits in the basement, and I'm in the basement, and I'm on the opposite side of the house. So, I did for a long time have my equipment literally sitting right next to me. And I understand that not everybody has the ability of putting it into another room or in a garage or in a basement or wherever. Whatever you do, don't put it in a closet, because that's not going to be good for it. It needs to be able to expel the heat that's generated. It's not loud though. From when I'm down in the basement, my rack sits in the basement in one of the corners. It's got a dedicated circuit on my circuit breaker for power in my house. And then I ran the cable for internet to that location, and I have my internet hooked into that. My oldest son has a nice computer that we bought him for his 18th birthday, and he sits downstairs and he's got his computer's a Dell XPS 8940, just like mine is, and it's VR ready, and he runs VR downstairs, and the servers aren't that loud. I've found that UCS are pretty quiet, So take it for what it is. If you're looking for, I'd say 128 gigs of RAM. It's not the RAM that's the problem. It's the CPUs. So, and the more resource intensive workloads that you run are going to drive up the utilization. But if I was to put a decibel meter downstairs in my rack, you know what the loud thing is in my rack? It's not the servers. It's my firewall. My firewall is loud. So take that for what it is. I mean, if you're worried about lots and lots of noise, the only time it's really loud is when it spins up, when it boots up for the first time. That's the only time it really gets loud. Other than that, it stays pretty quiet most of the time. This is a great video. When I was in college, we used real Cisco routers in class in pairs of 4. I bought my first set of Cisco routers and switches during the networking class and did the labs at home by myself before the team tried to tackle the labs. Now I have a multi-vendor lab environment in my house. Right there with you. With the development, especially in the AMD space, I'm able to run a 16-core Threadripper with 128 gigs of RAM quietly and next to my desk. It was completely changed the game for me. I also have a half rack of physical equipment I incorporate into my virtual labs. It is the simple things that really give you an edge. 100% agree. 100% agree. So that's the whole thing. I did used to run physical equipment as well, and then I came down to be one of those things where I just needed to I needed more than what the physical rack could give me of physical equipment, because you're limited to what equipment you have there. Virtual labs will scale almost infinitely, and you can come up with any kind of like design you want. You're not limited to the cabling or anything that's physical. There's no physical limitations in a virtual world. So that's other than the underlying resources. As long as you work with inside of your constraints, you're in good shape. And that's the one thing I would recommend you guys do. If getting a server, I really recommend getting a couple of SSDs and make a RAID 1 array. Will make a huge performance improvement for virtualization. Install your hypervisor and EVE-NG on SSDs. 100% agree with you on that one. And a lot of thanks for putting out that video. Let me scoot up here a little bit. I am going rather quickly because there are so many comments. Like, I was surprised at the amount of feedback I got. Hi Rob, or tech support Thursday ticket 11. Hi Rob, can you give an advice about CCIE Service Provider journey? I'm now preparing for SP Core. Then I want to begin lab training. I have Eve Community, CML server with ESXi, and not a lot of free time. The problem with it is there's not a lot of training out there for it. There's only one book I would recommend. The two things that I went through were INE's CCA Service Provider content. I went through version 3 and version 4. It's not the best. It covers a lot of the main things, like it covers intra AS MPLS, so you'll cover, all the different variations of MPLS layer 3 and layer 2 VPN. Make sure you have those down solid. Inter AS MPLS, so option A, B, C, D, make sure you have those down. Make sure you understand multicast VPNs, all the different profiles. I studied probably 12 or 14 of them, and I got through quite a bit of them, and a lot of them are not difficult to work with. There's slight modifications between each one, and once you understand the differentiations between them, they're pretty easy to bulk together and get them knocked out. But the problem, the book, Nick Russo's book, this CCA Service Provider Comprehensive Guide, and there's another one that he teams up. Look on LeanPub, go do a Google search for LeanPub and CCIE SP. There's a dual book there, Nick's book, and then there's another book co-written by 2 other people. Get that book as well. It's like a $500 bundle. It'll pretty much get you where you want to be. Now, this information is a bit dated now because the books came out 4 or 5 years ago, but a lot of the content is still relevant. I'd say probably 70-80% of it. The other thing that I went out and did is I went out and bought on Amazon segment routing books by Clarence Fills. I believe he's Belgian. So I bought those books. I spent $100 on those 2. I'd get them. And then Orhan Ergon has some training for segment routing. I think I paid $100 for that, 15 hours of content, and it covers segment routing. It covers all the different stuff in there. I started going through it, and then I don't work with segment routing at all. So to me, it was like I was wasting my time learning something I would never need. So that's my recommendation. I use Eve. Download iOS XR, both the 6.0 version, 6.1.3, the Nexus 9K, or the iOS XR 9K, CSR 1000 Vs, stuff like that. You're definitely going to want to spend a lot of your time on layer 3 and layer 2 connectivity, because that's going to be the main focus. But I remember from the SP Lab, there was a lot of multicast. But that's not everything. So they test you on a lot of stuff. But just be cognizant of the blueprint. There's a lot. I gave up on the SP track a little over a year ago. I took the lab in November 2019. I did pretty good on it. I'd say I got about a 50%. I got a lot of things working, but when it got towards the end, I was just like, it's not worth it for me. I took the one lab attempt. Like I said, 50%. I got, I think, 4 out of 10 tickets right. I passed. I failed troubleshooting, passed diagnostics, failed config. But I did pretty good in troubleshooting. I think out of 10 tickets, I think I got 4 of them, 4 or 5. And then for diagnostics wasn't that difficult. As long as you understand the theory to a lot of stuff, you're going to be in good shape there. And then config, I did pretty good in config. I think I was in the 50% pass rate on that one. So overall, I did pretty well. I'd say I was in the 50-60%. I was most of the way there. There's just a couple specific things got me hung up, but I decided to just drop it at that point. And then COVID dropped, and I was no longer able to pursue my CCIE. So that's why I've switched completely over to VMware. So that's why you've seen a lot of VMware content lately. I should say you will be seeing more VMware content. So back to that, how $1,000 investment could earn you $100,000 or more. Awesome, man. Now, how do I make $1 million? You and me both, brother. He knows who he is. Some of these comments are obviously not people that follow my channel on a regular basis, because they're just general comments. Let's see. So this comment is legit. One good thing about passive income is that you can have money coming in even as you pursue your primary job. Or if you're able to build up a solid stream of passive income, you might want to kick back. And either way, passive income gives you extra security. I agree with that. There's a number of other ones that are more wealth-driven comments, and you're free to read those if you like. I don't know any of these companies that I'm seeing here, so I won't vouch for an organization or a platform or a company that I don't know. I see the company I'm seeing is iDebts Off. I have no idea what that is, so I'm not going to comment on that other than just letting you know what specific company I'm seeing. Good stuff. A quick note on CML. Whenever Cisco has their Cisco Live, they usually give a discount, which is typically true. Alternate option. I forgot I saw this. Would be to run an Intel NUC. It's a little computer that's about the size of my wallet. About yay big. Easy to carry. Supports up to 64 gigs of RAM for now, at least. Power consumption is very minimal as well. Can we use public cloud to deploy EVE-NG? Why we need to buy server? simple. You can deploy EVE-NG in the cloud, but that's not the direct thing that I'm talking about here. EVE-NG is just one of many things that you can leverage once you've bought a server. And so the server is the first thing you need to buy. I'd say buy it locally because the upfront investment, $500-600, and then once you have the server and you got it built out, then you install ESXi. It's just how I do things. You can do whatever you want, right? It's just I'm offering advice and suggestions. That's it. Nothing more than that. Take it for what it is, just advice. You don't have to buy a server, right? But I'm not sure how flexible your labbing will be if you have to go to a Google Cloud or an Azure or some other cloud provider and do whatever it is you're going to do. And then you're paying, you don't have to physically go buy a server, but then you're going to be paying for the hourly usage of it. So yes, I do end up paying money for the power to run it, yes. But that's a small amount of money compared to, and it could be a wash. It could be the amount of money I'm spending on power. I could have a server up in the cloud. It could be very well that case. I have not gone through any cost comparison, because to me, having it on site by me physically means I have to troubleshoot everything. And so you get more out of it, in my opinion, that way than you would if you were just to run it run it in the cloud. Because if something goes wrong, you just blow it away. You don't have to troubleshoot it. Where if I can't get my server to boot, I got to go troubleshoot that. So, just the video I needed. Recently finished CCNA studying the Encore and then after that, a NARCI. Good luck to you, sir. So let's scoot up here a little bit. Let's see here. On the VXLAN live stream, has anyone ever ran into an issue with a VXLAN not being assigned a VNI? So I don't believe you can do that, because in what a VXLAN needs, it needs a VNI. So when you go create the VLAN and then you associate the VN-segment, you have to give it a VLAN ID, and then or a segment ID. When you give it a segment ID, then you go underneath the interface NVE, and then you associate that. So you type in member and then the VNI, and that's what allows the traffic inside of that VLAN to be tunneled over the VXLAN encapsulated connections to the other remote leaf switches. That's how that works. So if you don't have a VNI, it would be like you aren't tagging your VLANs. So you wouldn't be able to do that. So if that's not being assigned, I would go reconfigure it or give me more context as to what you're talking about, because that doesn't make any sense. VXLAN won't work unless there's a VNI to assign to it. And remember, the VNI is fabric specific. So you've got 16.7 million of them. So I can have a very large deployment, but every VLAN on every switch is going to need a VNI. So just keep that in mind. On VXLAN 16, thanks to you for the excellent content. Looking forward as always. Bootcamp session 3. How do you know when you're going live and follow? I really haven't been going live as of lately, because I haven't been. I need to get back into that, because I said I would, and I just haven't been. But I did run a boot camp for CCNA a couple weekends ago. It turned out pretty well. We had a pretty good turnout. So yeah, I would. If you are a subscriber to this channel, then anytime I go live, you'll get a notification that I went live. So subscribe. That's how you'll know. Subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. Bootcamp session 1, no need for whiteboarding for me. Okay. The reference is on the first bootcamp session. I did ask if anybody needed me to whiteboard out what I'm talking about, because having a picture to correlate to what I'm describing typically helps. So that's why I whiteboarded as I was moving forward. Let's see here. And so how to set up SD-WAN and ETH. Thank you, Rob. Good series to watch and learn. You are welcome. Let's see here. Getting near the end. Okay, here's the end. So There's another comment I'm going to skip because it's regarding wealth again. Bootcamp session 1. He did it like Dora the Explorer. I don't understand why you type standby 10 preempt on interface with lower priority. Because in order for as far as I know, you have to have a preemption command turned on both interfaces in order for it to fail over. So if preemption is I'd have to go back and look at the documentation, but the last time I labbed it up, if it was missing, it wouldn't trigger. So if I have two devices that are acting as a HSRP pair, the primary box goes down, the secondary box takes over, right? Lower priority. When the other guy comes back online, I need to send the traffic back over to the original primary. In order for that to work, I need to be able to relinquish the active role, and that is why you would need it there. So is it required? I'm going to go with yes, but maybe you are testing it. You're like, well, I didn't put preemption on that interface with the lower priority, and it still worked. Okay, great. Then it's not necessary. But in my experience, anytime that I've ran into HSRP problems with not failing back or not preempting back to the original active, throwing the preemption command in there fixed that. So it's just one of those things where I just got used to doing it. At an hour and a half, you put interfaces gig 2 and 3 of switch 8 and gig 0 and gig 01 of switch 7 in different group channel for group channel 2 for switch 8 and 1 for switch 7. How is possible that LACP state is up for port channel 2? I'd have to go back and look, as I don't remember specifically, but I know they both came up. I'd have to go look at that timestamp and see what you were referencing. Last question. On VXLAN 2, Legacy Layer 2 network problems. Hi Rob, great video. 2 questions. Question 1. Could VTP pruning help with overpopulating MAC address tables in legacy environments? No, that is not what VTP's job is. Or VTP is VLAN propagation only. VLAN propagation, VTP pruning is only going to limit the amount of broadcasting of the information. It does not actually have anything to do with the active MAC propagation throughout the backbone. So if I have a number of devices that are connected to the environment and I have a very large layer 2 sprawl, VTP is only going to control what VLANs are learned where. That's it. So if by default, when you create a server and everybody else's client, and you configure the client or the server with a VLAN, it's automatically going to push all those VLANs down. Right, that's its job. So if I don't want that, I get rid of VTP, and then I have to manually create the VLANs. What will help control the MAC address propagation is if you can still run VTP server and client, server at the leaf, client at the, server at the spine, client at the leaf. My mistake. You can leverage trunk allowed lists. So if you have specifically, you can have every VLAN there, right? You can have every VLAN there, and that you would want. Let's say you've got 50 VLANs created, but only 5 of those 50 are actually applied to ports on the leaf side. And you've got VLANs, say, 5 through 15. Or, let's say 6 through 10, right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you would go on the spine side, and you would configure or the distribution side, you configure a trunk allowed list to say trunk allowed 6 through 10. And so switchport trunk allowed VLAN 6 through 10, right? That's the only VLANs that would be allowed. And only MAC addresses inside of those VLANs would be sent down to that switch. So you can control it. But that's just bad. That's a band-aid, right? And that's not a good long-term solution. It's more of a temporary thing. So just keep those things in mind. question 2 of VXLAN. If you use a single multicast address for several VNIs, will this also reduce the amount of MAC addresses as compared to traditional environments? I mean, every VTIP that is part of a multicast group will still learn all the MAC addresses of the hosts that send out bump traffic, right? So I would say in order for it to scale, you should really divide the various VNIs into corresponding multicast address groups. Please correct me if I'm wrong or missing something. So let's circle back. If you use a single multicast address for several VNIs, will this also reduce the number of MAC address compared to traditional networking? Okay, so the key thing you got to remember here is when you're deploying VXLAN, the only devices that are learning MAC addresses are the leaf switches. The spines do not learn any MAC addresses. From a routing perspective, if your VTEPs are all in the same subnet, which sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It depends on the routing design. But so let me think about this for a second. So if I have let's look at it from I'm gonna kind of cheat here a little bit. If you're dealing with, say, VMware NSXT, where all of your TEP interfaces or all of you're using in order for communications to happen from your edge nodes to your transport nodes, and for that communication to happen, all of your transport nodes would have to be using connections that would allow all of the other devices to learn their the TEP addresses. So they're all going to, more than likely, all going to be in the same subnet, all going to be in the same MAC address table. So in that case, the only MAC addresses that would be learned is going to be the TEP addresses, because the device that's doing the overlay, whether it's an ESXi host or it's a Nexus 9K switch or a Catalyst switch running VXLAN, the only device that's going to be learning MAC addresses is that device. The MAC addresses are not going to be propagated up into the rest of the network. So the distribution layer switch, your spines, they're not going to see any of that. Any communication from one leaf to another leaf is going to have to be routed to the other devices, right? And because of this happening, there's not going to be any MAC address propagation to any of the devices northbound of your leaf or your access. And that's the purpose of doing an overlay bridging, meaning you're taking layer 2 traffic, MAC address, you've got on leaf 1 you got PC1, and on leaf 2 you got PC2. Leaf 1 and leaf 2 are not wired to each other. They have to go through a spine or some sort of northbound device. More often than not, that IP address is not going to be, it could be or may not be on the same subnet, which means that from connectivity purposes, you're going to need to route between the two. So you're going to be taking layer 2 traffic and you're going to be encapsulating inside of layer 3, tunneling it between the source and destination endpoints, or your TEPs, the tunnel endpoints, and then decapsulating and then delivering the layer 2 traffic. The endpoints don't know that they're being encapsulated. They don't know that there's an overlay. They don't know that they're not directly connected to the same device. They're completely oblivious to this whole fact. So, to answer your other question, the multicast groups, you can use the same multicast group for everybody if you want to. I use the same multicast group for everybody just because of the fact it's easier to control. Just remember that if you do decide to use a different multicast group per VNI, that's going to make your multicast routing table grow. Your MRoute table, your MRIB, that's going to be much heavier utilization than it would be if you were to use the same MAC address table or the same multicast table that everybody else is using. If it's broken up, it makes it much harder to scale. So, in the last part of your question, I would say no, it doesn't. You don't need that to scale. So I mean, every VTEP that is part of multicast would still learn all the MAC addresses of the hosts and send out bump traffic. So bump traffic, the bump traffic itself is going to leverage multicast, and all the bump traffic is doing is I have a ping, or a DHCP request, or I have an ARP request that's got to go out. I'm going to use multicast to send that request out to every other leaf switch that's also joined to the same multicast group. So if I use 224 1.1.1, that means that if a leaf 2 and leaf 3 are also have that VNI associated in that multicast group, they're going to receive the DHCP request or the ARP request inbound. And then they're going to reply to it. That's basically all bump traffic is used for. But once that MAC address propagation has happened and leaf 1, 2, and 3 have learned all the MAC addresses for those devices. Now, mind you, remember that the spines don't learn anything. The only thing that they're aware of is the VTEP IPs. And then if the VTEPs are all in the same subnet, then they learn the VTEP MAC addresses, depending on the design. I'm not going to go any further than that because I'd have to start whiteboarding out stuff because me just talking about it is probably going to confuse you. But that's basically the driver. So more often than not, it's going to be routed, so you're not going to learn MAC addresses. All you're going to know is there's a route to an IP address in the network. I've only tested out, I've tested VXLAN on an Nexus 9K switch where the connection between the spine and the leaf, that connection was layer 3. So from a routing perspective, all I learned was the VTEP IP address, which was the loopback address. I have also tested out NSXV and NSXT in a virtual environment where the physical hosts all connect to the same switch. So from the TEP addresses, the VM kernel adapters that are used for the tunnel endpoints are all in the same subnet. They're all in the same VLAN. So I do learn the MAC addresses that way. But, pardon me, it's when you're using a VXLAN design or a Geneve design inside of NSX, you're purposely attaching all of your hosts to the same switch or the same group of switches so that you can provide high availability, and all those TEP addresses are in the same VLAN for reachability purposes. From a physical switch perspective, all we care about or all we see is the IP and MAC addresses of the VM kernel adapters. We don't actually see the MAC addresses being learned from the ESXi host to the top of rack switch or the Tor switch. We don't see that. We'll see some MAC addresses being learned, but that's only going to be the TEP address, MAC address. We're not going to learn the VM MAC addresses. That's being encapsulated inside of some sort of tunneling protocol like VXLAN or Geneve, depending on if I'm using NSX for vSphere or NSXT for data centers. Hopefully that answers your question. This is a common thing that I get when I'm starting to explain how overlays work, because if you don't understand overlays, I could see why you would get confused. I'm going to try to get this video posted as quickly as I can. Thank you again to everybody that commented and left me a message. I will continue to do my best to keep doing this. Until next time, guys, take it easy.